Hello, I'm Ellen Binns, coming today from Scottsdale, Arizona, where I'm visiting my children. Welcome to Impact, a podcast about how we can each bring about real change in the world and getting practical in making that happen.
And hello, I'm Clive Johnson, coming today from, I was going to say the UK. No, I'm not. Where am I? I'm near Paphos in Cyprus. So we are both a good couple of hours time zone difference from our usual places, aren't we? We had to work it out, especially since you're in Arizona, as we were saying. It has its own rules according to time zones. So I think there's a 10-hour gap between us at the moment. Anyway, that shouldn't be an indication of going further apart, hopefully.
We're global. We're truly global.
Indeed, absolutely. A special welcome if you're listening for the first time, and a big thank you to our new subscribers. Each week we look at one aspect of how we can connect our hearts to offer healing for others with our collective intention, prayers, and meditation, and go behind the headlines of a critical happening in our world that needs our attention right now.
In today's episode, we take one of these regular deep dives to more fully understand and tune in with something that many of us may know only a little about, but unfortunately, some of us know a lot about, and see where we might hone in with our prayers and intentions. And as we record, it's October 9th, 2025.
And this week, we turn our attention, as Alan says, to a topic that is sadly rarely far from the news headlines, especially in the US, and is one that seems to have become a constant fear for many Americans: the deeply disturbing phenomenon of mass shootings. The final few days of last month alone saw no less than 3 mass shootings in the US, which left at least 8 people dead. These included an attack at a Mormon church in Grand Blanc Township in Michigan on September 28th, in which a man rammed his truck into the church and opened fire on congregants before setting the building on fire. An attack on an outdoor bar in Southport, North Carolina, a day earlier that left 3 people dead, and a fatal shooting during a brawl on New Orleans' Bourbon Street that left 1 woman dead and 3 others injured. And these horrifying incidents, sadly, are not unique, following just days after an ambush in North Codorus Township in York County, Pennsylvania, which led to the deaths of 3 police detectives and critically wounding 2 others, and following a trend that has continued for many months.
As of the time of our recording, more than 300 mass shootings have occurred in the United States this year, causing the deaths of more than 300 people and over 1,300 being wounded. The shootings have taken place in a wide array of locations, including in large cities such as Houston, Chicago, close to where I'm from, Philadelphia, Memphis, Atlanta, Lexington, and New York, as well as smaller cities and rural areas across nearly every state. Residential neighborhoods, retail stores, nightclubs, churches, gas stations, and the streets have all borne witness to what nationally has become an almost daily happening. And I have to interject here that I asked Clive that we cover this topic, and it's embarrassing for me, actually. And as I was, reading this and getting ready for this today, I just, my heart just hurts, and it really is so heavy for those of us in the United States. And it was surprising to me to know that the current rate is consistent with what was seen last year, in which 488 mass shootings across the country were recorded by the Gun Violence Archive, which defines a mass shooting as an incident in which 4 or more people are injured or killed. And this is at a rate outpacing previous years.
Yeah.
Mass shootings in the U.S. occur at a frequency and scale far greater than in other high-income nations. And while the U.S. makes up less than 5% of the world's population, in the last 2 decades, it has accounted for over 30% of public mass shootings and nearly 3/4 of all mass shootings globally. That is a sobering statistic.
It's a staggering number. Mm.
High gun violence rates are seen in some other countries, especially where there is political instability or high levels of gang and trafficking violence, such as in Venezuela, the Philippines, and parts of Central America and sub Saharan Africa, but not commonly at the scale of mass shootings seen in the US. Mass shooting occurrences are reported in some other countries too, including France, Germany, Canada, Finland, Russia, Yemen, and Uganda, but these pale in comparison to the US frequency.
And it's quite striking, isn't it, that it seems to be I wouldn't say necessarily a recent phenomenon because we are Columbine and so on, 20 years plus now. But certainly when I was younger, maybe I wasn't quite so in tune with the news at that time. And when I was sort of growing up, I didn't hear about school shootings and
No.
and certainly not quite on this scale that we've seen last month, for example. It really does seem to be, well, at the level we were reporting, it's almost one person on average dying every day through one of these mass.
Well, and here in the States, when there was one before, especially Columbine or Uvalde or whatever, it kind of felt like the world stopped and there was incredible recording and reporting about it. And now I am telling you, it's so sad that when you hear about it, it's like, oh, another one. Oh, another one.
Yes.
Sometimes they're not even reported.
Mm.
Hardly at all, maybe locally, but not nationally. And that's what scares me a lot.
And as we said, they're occurring everywhere. It's pretty much every state. It's in the big cities, of course, but it can be anywhere. It can be in any neighborhood.
Absolutely.
So, of course, this begs the obvious, perennial, and seemingly elusive question: why are mass shootings so prevalent in the US? Now, having looked into this a little bit, I think I have my own answer to this, but let's see what the experts say. Several interrelated factors are commonly offered as possible explanations. Firstly, and certainly might be likely most significantly, the US has very high rates of civilian gun ownership and far less restrictive gun control laws than most other nations, which mean that the firearms are widely accessible. While a little old now, a 2018 study put American civilian ownership of guns at 46% of the world's total. In other words, nearly 1 in every 2 civilians in the world who owns a gun is a US citizen. Now, some other countries do have quite permissive laws towards gun ownership, yet the US stands out for its high level of gun ownership, and in no other country is purchasing a firearm as straightforward. In some US states, ammunition may even be purchased at convenience stores. And I was thinking, it doesn't seem that long ago when I was visiting and traveling, I don't know if this was in particular states, that I would go into a Walmart or a liquor store or something, and there'd be guns in the showcase, which presumably, with relatively limited documentation, you could purchase over the counter. I don't think that's quite so prevalent now, is it? But
yeah, it's quite a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then these gun shows where they don't do the appropriate, they break the laws and who they're selling them to, or the laws are different at the gun. It's just very complicated.
Yeah. Now, this seems to get compounded by the fact that there seemingly are incomplete databases for background checks and quite lax enforcement of the existing gun safety laws, which again make purchasing a gun really quite easy for most people. And this sometimes includes those who are prohibited from gun ownership by federal law. There's quite a list actually of those, but it includes anyone that's been convicted of a felony or who are unlawful users of addicted or controlled substances.
And I might interject that, like on the south side of Chicago, I have a friend who lives down there, several friends who live on the south side, and they have said, if you want a gun, you can get it in 30 minutes.
Incredible. I think the thing that kind of astonishes me is how young some of these perpetrators, the ones that have taken revenge on their old school or something, appear to be as well.
Yeah. Getting them the guns often from their parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
Owned by their parents. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Meanwhile, many US citizens famously take pride in their constitutional right to own a firearm, which is a right enshrined by the Second Amendment of the US Constitution. And of course, this is a politically sensitive point that few politicians have been willing to take issue with. The Second Amendment, I have to be honest, the first time I've actually read it. Hear the term mentioned a lot, but it doesn't mean quite so much, of course, if you're in the UK. But it actually states that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So this points to the right of self-defense that many affirm as a basic freedom. And the principle, by the way, I learned actually when I looked into this, was recognized and probably adopted from what was then English common law before the US Constitution was drafted. Although, of course, it's been long repealed in English law and, of course, the law of many countries. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be where it potentially originated from.
Yeah. The right is fiercely defended by many, including the National Rifle Association, famously called the NRA, which maintains a very strong political lobby against gun control, despite undergoing internal turmoil and seeing revenues fall during the recent years. It is the success of the lobby to uphold the Second Amendment, affirmed through Supreme Court rulings, that has distinguished the U.S. from amongst most other nations as being reluctant to tighten gun ownership regulation. While the right to bear arms and ease of access to acquiring them may not be a reason alone for the incidence of shootings in the U.S., taken together with other factors, many observers believe it's a critical element for explaining the frequency of gun attacks across the country. And, for our listeners who are around the globe, which we truly do have global listeners, the regulations that people are trying to put in are just, and they're actually called common sense gun laws, where you do background checks and you have to register, hopefully a little bit like getting a driver's license. That's what people are hoping for. No one is saying that we need to take everyone's guns away, which is what the NRA is using the fear of that.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, when we look at the numbers there, if it is 40%, 46% of the world total, and 1 in 2 Americans owning a gun, in a sense, it would suggest to me that actually that kind of regulation is working in the main, but it's just the sheer scale that means that when there is the occasional loophole or it's not, it gets relaxed because it's so easy and apparently affordable. This was another factor to buy a gun and the ammunition. It's inevitable, really, that given the population, there's going to be scary numbers of people that fall through the loop, I would think. Yeah.
Well, and I say to my friends who are gun owners, who are very adamant, maybe on the other side of this issue than I am, I'll be honest. And I say to them, you guys should be first in line for these common sense gun laws, because if there aren't these laws, they make you look bad. And, who knows what's going to happen if we don't get the common sense part of this taken care of.
Yeah.
They don't agree with me. I don't know why.
It's a hard one to understand, isn't it? I mean, the principle of self-defense, and particularly if you're living in a place or a time where you feel insecure and you want having a gun by your bed pillow makes you feel safer.
Well, and the automatic, the ones that shoot off 70 rounds in 3 seconds, or what? I know I'm being dramatic, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. That was the Las Vegas one, wasn't it, a few years ago? Yeah.
Nobody needs those.
No.
Nobody needs those.
No.
And that's what they're working for too. Obviously a lot of resistance.
Yeah. There's something very deep rooted in it. I used to wonder whether it was something to do with the kind of the old pioneer, almost Wild West spirit, that it was dog eat dog almost in those days, a kind of a hangover from that period. But
absolutely. And that's what many people interpret. The Second Amendment, they interpret the Second Amendment to be from those days. Not now.
No. I think society's moved on a bit from there, as far as I can see, but who knows? But there are seemingly other contributors to why this is a problem, particularly in the US, which include personal grievances, gang and drug disputes, domestic violence, racism, extremist ideologies, social polarization, and psychological drivers such as hatred towards an institution or particular people. And that often seems to be a likely motivation in these sort of lone, particularly like the school shootings, isn't it?
Yes.
But these aren't, of course, unique factors or especially pronounced in the US. But as we say, they may be more frequently, may lead to gun crime simply because guns are more freely available. Mass shootings are almost exclusively perpetrated by men with toxic masculinity, a desire for notoriety, actually wanting to be seen as a famous criminal, revenge against perceived injustices, and alienation also being cited as significant contributing factors. And worryingly, some who crave attention for their crimes reportedly say that they had hoped to surpass past records, enact a copycat attack of another high-profile shooting, or be remembered as a notorious criminal. Mental health issues are often cited by some experts to be at the root of many such cases. However, as with pretty much any crime really, it seems unlikely that that is invariably the case, even if it is quite often a factor. Now, it's not our aim here today. Many have tried to get to the bottom of why the shootings occur. But we might at least remember to hold intention for wisdom for those who do seek answers, and so have wisdom to know where to direct efforts to prevent or certainly reduce such crime.
And I've often said that to cure this issue, it's like spokes on a wheel. At the center, the hub, we have the shootings, but there's the spoke of mental illness, and there's the spoke of the guns being available, and the hatred and the polarization. These are all different spokes. We can't just work on one thing.
No,
it's going to take working on many things. And for instance, when they claim it's not the guns, it's the mental health issue. Great, then let's ramp up the help for mental health.
Yes.
But unfortunately, we've cut that recently.
Yes.
This administration has devastatingly cut the help for mental health. So, remembering there are many things we have to do to solve this issue, not just one.
I mean, one of my guilty pleasures is, well, probably my main guilty pleasure is listening to true crime podcasts when I'm not listening to sort of thing that we do. And I think one of the appeals for me, one of the interests is trying to understand what the motivations are. There's a great interest, of course, in how detectives work out an answer. But there's also something about thereby, but for the grace of God, go I, if I had been brought up in a particular environment or, particular peer pressure or circumstances, can I be sure that I wouldn't have possibly been led down that path as well, or if I had a particular mental health condition. And I think one of the striking things for me is just how complex it is. Every single case virtually is different. It has its own spokes, if you like, and usually a number of factors coming into play. And whilst there might be this fairly broad categorization that detectives love, the sort of mad, bad, or sad reasons for being motivated, it's often quite a bit more complex than that, down to the individual, really. And absolutely, usually we know, don't we, the social upbringing, the grievances that didn't get sorted out that should have been heard, and so on. There's all sorts of
bullying,
things.
Not fitting in. Yeah.
Abuse plays a lot into it as well, very often.
Yep. Absolutely. But what are the impacts of these atrocities to the loved ones of those killed and injured and traumatized by such events, and not to mention the victims themselves? It may be obvious to understand. However, there are other impacts as well, and these may continue to have effects for many years. Survivors often experience post-traumatic stress disorder, of course, depression, anxiety, survivor's guilt, long-lasting grief, and Support for trauma, as well as for other physical and mental health needs, may need to continue for many years following a shooting. For many, the fear of a recurrence never goes away. Victims' families similarly often endure unresolved trauma, disrupted family dynamics, and an emotional impact that can run through several generations. Some may face long-term financial strain from lost income or medical expenses. The communities whose neighborhoods have witnessed a shooting must live with the collective grief and an enduring sense of vulnerability. This may be all the more palpable within an institution or organization which has been a specific target of vengeance. Schools are perhaps the most affected, in which teachers, students, parents, and others seeking understanding for their own losses, but also the collective loss and fear for the safety of all who must still use the facility may continue indefinitely. And I can tell you that the shooting that happened in Minneapolis with the children at the Catholic school who were actually praying in the chapel, the little girl who was killed was the child of someone my daughter went to school with and knew quite well. You know, the 7 degrees of separation can happen in tragic events too.
Yes.
So our community was touched by that. We all know, and we talk often, that it's not if, it's when it happens in our community. Sadly, you know, to have to talk like that for children who go to school. And I just read something about a mom reported on doing the training they do in the schools, the drills for an active shooter, and the impact it had on her kindergarten daughter just to do the drill when you consider that.
Wow. Absolutely. I mean, it's something that certainly we never dreamt of having to do in the UK.
Right. The ripple effect is big.
Yeah.
And to not live in the fear of it happening in your community is very important for us to do. Of course, we know that with our intentions that we set out and knowing what that does. You can't live in the fear of it. And yet the reality is difficult to live with.
Yeah, absolutely. I must admit, I think it's very powerful when you do have, as you say, like that 7 degrees, not even 7 degrees, it's 1 degree or 2 degrees of separation, which is not that surprising, sadly, given the frequency. For someone like me that is unfamiliar with this, obviously see it in the news and so on, and can feel, the pain of, the stories being told. But actually to really relate to it is really quite hard. I was in Florida some years ago, just a few days after the Parkland school shooting, and I was not too far from there, kind of the next town. I was running a labyrinth event, actually, and this was the idea. Well, I'll set up this labyrinth for Parkland memory or vigil or whatever. And I was quite surprised. I spoke to people after the event, a number of people. Basically, they're saying, we don't need prayers. We don't want labyrinths or whatever it is. Thank you, but we need action.
Yes.
And that kind of really brought home to me just how palpable this was. And of course, there were people who knew people affected directly by that particular tragedy. And I saw it in other communities across Central Florida as I was traveling at that time as well.
Right.
So you say it does spread. It's not just the immediate place.
Right. And with these ideological differences we talked about, some communities become polarized around the issue of gun ownership, with the shooting serving to intensify the differences rather than being a trigger for coming together as a community. That can be a problem too. At the same time, while a long-term identity for a community may become tied to a tragic event in its history, like Columbine, Sandy Hook, Uvalde, for those that do not witness such atrocity in their own neighborhood, a culture of normalization can result in which repeated exposure to news of such shootings desensitizes the public mood, as I was talking about. We're not even seeing it being covered, or we don't have that horror when we hear about it anymore. It's like, oh, there's the other one. There's another one. It's really tragic.
Yeah. So where might we hone in with our intention and prayers? And as always, this is the point you might want to bookmark, to come back to when you want to set aside time for holding intention. And we will run through a number of suggested topics fairly quickly, which you may wish to pause after each. So just taking a moment, as always, to allow yourself to feel into your own center and become deeply connected with your higher inner self, becoming at one with the flow of what some of us may know as divine or benevolent energy, of loving kindness, and having an intention to will this flow into the hearts and the minds of others. We will that those who seek to understand the causes of mass shootings in U.S. communities will have wisdom to know where to focus their attention, and that those who have responsibility for deciding and implementing policy for regulation will be cognizant of their findings.
And we ask that all those who have been left in shock and grief following the recent shootings in Grand Blanc, New Orleans, Southport, North Carolina, will be held in light, supported, and filled with courage.
We will that there will be a community-wide yearning for unity, compassion, and mutual support for survivors and families grieving those lost or severely impaired following a shooting.
We pray for community healing and unity where there is a risk of division or confusion about the appropriate response to a shooting.
We ask that state governors, city mayors, and others who have influence will continue to remember and make provision for the long-term support of those who have suffered trauma as a result of a shooting.
And we ask that all who continue their lives in the shadow of a tragedy will be protected, encouraged, and supported, including students and others returning to school, college, and workplace sightings of shootings, where permanent reminders of a past tragedy have not been or may not be removed.
And this week, as we take stock of the shocking prevalence of mass shooting events in the US, we suggest holding as our main intention, we will that educators, community leaders, and legislators across all US states will have wisdom to guide policy, advocacy, and teaching that will support nonviolence and significantly reduce or eliminate gun violence, while respecting and winning the support of those who continue to strongly advocate for their Second Amendment right to defend themselves. Please join us in holding this.
That about wraps it up for this episode. Remember, you can connect with us in the Facebook group and for live intention holding in Clive's daily Insight Timer offerings, and with me in the Labyrinth Activist Network's Zoom calls. Details of how to hook up with these are in our show notes. Look out, too, for our next special topic episode, which we'll be releasing in the next few days. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening, for your prayers, and for your intentions on this topic, and for sharing with us in this. We look forward to connecting again next time. And in the meantime,
thank you, go well, stay safe.
And remember, we're more powerful together.
Impact is presented by Ellen Binns and Clive Johnson and produced by Impact Productions. Our theme music is by Chris Collins and our logo artwork is by Auto Classic. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, or your favorite podcast provider. We're a non-commercial podcast dedicated to people of any faith tradition or none who yearn for healing in our troubled world. Please pass on the word so others may join us in making an impact. Thank you for listening.